Okay, picture this. A full-blown war erupts in the Middle East. A global energy blockade kicks in, and suddenly, oil prices are screaming past $100 a barrel. Now, this isn't some history lesson. It's a look at a scenario from March 2026 that sent absolute shockwaves through the entire global economy. So let's dive in and really unpack how a conflict in one region can trigger a crisis for all of us.
Because really, it all boils down to a pretty simple and, let's be honest, a kind of terrifying question. How can a war happening thousands of miles away have a direct impact on what you pay for gas, for your groceries, for literally everything? Well, that's the chain reaction we're about to follow, domino by domino.
And that very first domino to fall, well, it's always war. A shadow conflict that's been simmering for decades finally just explodes into an open, full-scale military confrontation.
And let me tell you, it all happens incredibly fast. On February 26th, diplomatic talks over Iran's nuclear program just completely fall apart. Then, just 2 days later, boom, the US and Israel launch a massive preemptive strike. In all that chaos, Iran's supreme leader is killed, and his son, a known hardliner with really deep ties to the military, takes power. Any hope for a quick, peaceful way out of this? Yeah, that just went up in smoke.
So right away, you see this incredible imbalance in military thinking. On one side, you've got the US coalition, right? They've got aircraft carriers, fifth-gen fighter jets. It's that classic shock and awe approach. But on the other side, Iran and its allies unleash something called asymmetric warfare. See, they're not trying to win a head-on fight. Their goal is maximum disruption, using swarms of fast boats, kamikaze drones, and ballistic missiles. It's a total David versus Goliath situation. But how does a country respond when it feels cornered? Well, it makes a move that can paralyze the entire world.
And that move, it targets the world's most critical energy choke point. You see, this isn't about winning on the battlefield anymore. This is about strangling the global economy.
And this right here is the target, the Strait of Hormuz. And you should think of it exactly like this. It is the jugular vein of the global oil supply, a tiny, narrow little strip of water that is absolutely essential to keeping our modern world running. So here's the number that matters, 20%. 1/5 of the entire world's daily oil consumption, not to mention a quarter of its natural gas, has to squeeze through this one tiny strait. And Iran just slammed the door shut. The immediate result is kind of like a blocked drain in your bathtub. If the water can't get out, you have to turn off the tap, right? Same idea here. Oil producers in the Gulf can't just keep pumping crude if the ships can't leave. Their storage tanks fill up with terrifying speed. So what happens to all the supertankers that are already on their way? Well, that traffic jam is about to cause a total collapse.
And that leads us to the very next domino, the physical shutdown of oil production. The world's energy supply is literally being choked off right at the source.
Just look at these numbers because they are staggering. Iraq is forced to cut over 3 million barrels a day. That's 70% of its entire output. Saudi Arabia, the world's emergency supplier, cuts 2.5 million. Kuwait, over 1 million, and they have no choice. Iraq's storage would be totally full in a week, Kuwait's in just 2. They physically have to shut down their wells. And the market's reaction? You guessed it, pure panic. In the first week of the conflict, the price for a single barrel of Brent crude oil skyrockets, peaking at $119.50 on March 9th. This is that moment when the financial world realizes a massive supply shock isn't just a possibility anymore, it's happening right now.
Okay, so we've seen the war, we've seen the blockade. Now let's talk about the domino that comes knocking on your front door. Let's connect these huge global events directly to your wallet.
The chain reaction is pretty simple, and honestly, it's brutal. First, crude oil soars. That immediately means higher prices for gasoline and especially diesel at the pump. And since pretty much everything you buy has to be shipped on a truck, a train, or a boat, transportation costs for all goods go way up. And that leads directly to the final step, higher prices for food, clothes, electronics, you name it. And this isn't just some theory. Listen to this quote from Spain's Transport Association. They're talking about financial suffocation and the ghost of possible strikes. When the truckers who deliver all of our goods can't even afford the fuel to do their jobs, the entire supply chain is at risk of grinding to a complete halt.
So, with the global economy basically on the brink, the world's major powers realize they can't just stand by and watch anymore. They are forced to make their move.
So what does Europe do? They assemble a naval task force. France takes the lead here, sending its nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, to be the command center. But look at the specialized roles here. Spain sends its advanced F-105 frigate to provide this powerful anti-missile shield, while Italy and the Netherlands bring in ships that specialize in anti-submarine warfare and fleet defense. Their mission is crystal clear: force open a safe corridor through the strait, no matter what.
Now, here's where the geopolitics get really interesting, because not everyone sees this crisis the same way. For Russia, this is basically a strategic windfall. High oil prices are great for their economy, and a distracted West means less pressure on them in other conflicts. But for China, the world's biggest energy importer, this blockade is an existential threat. It could totally cripple their manufacturing economy. That's why they're desperately calling for stability, but at the same time, they're refusing to get involved militarily.
And all of this leads to the one thing Western nations dread: the economic nightmare scenario known as stagflation. It's truly the worst of both worlds. Just imagine your cost of living is rising sharply, but at the exact same time, the economy is shrinking and jobs are getting harder to find. It's kind of like your car costing more and more to run, but it's also slowing down and can't get you where you need to go.
All of which leaves us with this final, really critical question. This whole crisis has exposed a massive vulnerability at the very heart of our globalized world. So much of our economic stability, our daily lives, relies on keeping these incredibly narrow corridors open. We've just seen what happens when one of them closes. The real question is, are we prepared for the next time?